Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 301. And hey, here's a fun little fact. Did you know we had the founder of X.AI on this very show? But it's not what you think. The date was August 30, 2016. The show was episode number 044. And the topic was artificial intelligence with Dennis Mortensen. So at the time, X.AI was a company that was just trying to solve multi-party meeting scheduling via email. And we talked a lot about like highly specialized agents. And it was this wild conversation about how these simple things that we think are simple can actually be pretty complicated to hand over to the machine. But that was 2016. It was a totally different world. And it feels like that was kind of an ancient ancestor of the AI world we're living in today. And we are going to talk a lot about AI on this episode. And I'm going to do that with my co-hosts. Julie Hoyer, you're from Further. Is AI something that comes up at all in your day-to-day?
If I had a nickel for every time I heard AI, right?
Yep, that's what I thought. And Val Kroll, you're from Fin, the company formerly known as Intercom. Is AI something that your company, are they doing anything at all with AI?
Yeah, we're just starting to dabble, really. Just starting to get our toes out. No, it's top to bottom here at Fin.
The fundamental grounding of the primary offering.
Yeah.
And I'm Tim Wilson, or maybe I'm not. And this is just an AI agent that Tim built to record this episode on his behalf. Who knows? So sure, all three of us have been exploring and learning and using AI, but none of us have dived in deeply enough to, write a really useful book about it. And as far as I know, none of us were product leaders at Microsoft focused on the creation and build out of Power BI. But our guest has done both. Rob Collie is the CEO of P3 Adaptive, which does custom AI and data work for mid-market and Fortune 1000 companies. He's a former Microsoft engineer on the Excel team and a founding engineer on what became Power BI. He's the host of the Raw Data with Rob Collie podcast, and he's the author of an upcoming book, Fair Game, Customizing AI to Your Business is Easier Than You Think. It's not publishing until August 15th, but we got a preview. It's amazing. And it's available for pre-order now wherever books are sold, including fairgamebook.ai, which gives instant access to the first few chapters and a few other perks. And today, Rob is our guest. So welcome to the show, Rob.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this already. This has been great.
All right. So we don't usually kick off the show with a, hey, give us your professional history. But one of the reasons we really wanted to have you on specifically is that you're not just kind of any old run-of-the-mill AI thought leader, half the people who have LinkedIn accounts right now. You actually kind of came from our people. And I mentioned in the intro, but you had a formative part of your career working at Microsoft, including being part of like the birth of Power BI, which is inarguably like one of the premier, most successful BI platforms out there. So I think that actually may be a good place to start. So can you sort of talk about your role, from Microsoft through kind of connect the dots for us as to how that set you on the trajectory to where you are today and like helping organizations figure out like useful paths forward with AI?
I would love to. So I didn't, like most people who love data, I didn't know that I loved data. I didn't grow up saying I want to be a data professional, whatever. I've talked for years and years about how some of us just sort of carry this thing I call the data gene. And we eventually discover that we have it. Like when we collide with Excel or whatever for the first time, most people bounce off like in terror. They don't like Excel, right? Yuck. But it actually is about 1 out of 16 people who collides with something like Excel and sticks and goes, ooh, that was kind of cool. Or their first collision with SQL. It's usually Excel. That's the first sticking point, but not always. And so I discovered that I had the data gene in my course of working at Microsoft. In fact, at one point early in my Microsoft career, I said to someone that I would never go to work on something like a product like Excel. Never.
Wow.
It was like beneath me. But then I went and I ended up kind of getting reorged into Excel and discovering, oh my God, this is totally where I needed to be. And so I got to know a few different really important audiences. I got to know the people who really kind of make the world go round, like the Excel power users, that 1 in 16 crowd. Back then, and even really to this day, they kind of make the world go round in a very kind of almost like thankless way. I got to know those people and really, really, really develop an affinity for them in a way, because I'm kind of one of them. And I was building products for them. And then at one point, I also got grabbed to be in charge of the BI investments in Excel. And so that was being dragged into like the corporate IT zone, right? and I learned the old style of BI through that experience. And then later, I was recruited to join the Power BI team when it was still called Project Gemini, super secret project. And the contrast between how the old style of BI, that most of us who are working in data or working in business intelligence were never part of the old traditional style BI, because it was so insular. It was so arcane. It was a very tiny priesthood that was involved in this stuff. And I couldn't even learn how to do it. I was working on it and I couldn't learn how to write the formulas in these old systems. So helping to build the Power BI, which was aimed at that original Excel crowd, those people that I like so much, the data gene crowd, and giving them industrial strength tools, I never thought that was going to work. I loved the project. It was exciting. It was definitely the place that I needed to work at Microsoft when they came to pitch me. But like everything else, I was just sort of expecting, this is probably going to suck, or maybe it'll take 3 versions to get it right. And then I was shocked at how good version 1 was. I mean, it was really fucking good. and I knew the world was going to change, but I also knew that consulting companies of the time were not going to want to work this way. They were not going to want to move at that pace. They were not going to want to work with clients of different sizes and pick up smaller, faster projects, which is what the world really needed. And that's what led me to start the company that I did. I wanted to go fill that niche. And guess what? I got to hire those types of people that I liked so much into these new consulting roles. Right? They became consultants. And that's what our company is largely staffed by, not 100%, but largely staffed by that data gene crowd that grew up in the business more so than in IT. And so it's sort of like I got to create a home for some of my favorite people at the same time. It was really kind of hard to pass up. So that's the first part of that journey.
And then, I mean, the link you make in the book is, and maybe this is that those are the people that you say they're kind of crafters, and like why crafters specifically are uniquely suited to do stuff with AI. So maybe that's my follow on is, can you talk sort of about like the leaders, crafters, developers, knowledge workers, and why that's an AI thing?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And first, let's just bridge one tiny little gap, which is like I didn't set out to write a book about AI. I'm a CEO of a data company, 50 plus person data company, and I see AI coming, and it was leading to this sense of dread, which I think we can all kind of relate to, right? Like AI is really good at writing code, it's actually really good at doing a lot of the things that data professionals do for a living. I went on a research project with my own sort of like journey down the rabbit hole to figure out what the future of our company should be. This was about survival. Like what, I had to do this. And what I found down that rabbit hole was far different than what I expected, and far more encouraging, and far more like, oh, we can do this sort of thing. And far more, oh, this is actually a data problem. Like it's like right in our wheelhouse. And the difference of sort of like feeling like AI was like opaque and inaccessible, going from that to going, oh, that's it. That feeling of like, oh, that's it. Like that feeling is what compelled me to write a book. Because when I found myself in possession of that feeling, which by the way is exactly what led me to write the first Power BI books that I wrote, 10 plus years ago, like me feeling like I understood something and knowing that there wasn't anything all that necessarily special about me, like the rest of the world can do this too. Like I felt like I owed that book. And I felt the same sort of vibes again, but like at a greater magnitude this time, because like everyone's worried about AI. But yeah, so back to your question, I've been calling these people the data gene crowd forever, but what they really are, and I think present company probably is, it's we, right? It's not they. What we really are people who are willing to think systematically about business problems while also remaining close to the business and understanding that, there's the technologists that kind of like want to be like locked in a closet and have like notes passed under the door of what to build. Right. And that's a lot of tech. Right. And you need those people, but that's a very inefficient way to work for most business solutions. Like being immersed in the business while at the same time having some tech skills enables a completely different style of work, a completely different tempo, and a completely different quality of output. But with AI coming along and the ability for people like us, people who picked up Excel and smiled, right? Like when people like us sit down with something like Claude Code for the first time, we sort of like get over our fear of trying something new. It's that same feeling, like captivating feeling like, oh my God. And so I needed to come up with a new name for these people. It's no longer the data gene crowd. I needed a noun for these people in the book. So I had to come up with something, and crafter is where I landed. So that leaders, crafters, and developers, ratio 2-5-80. Right? So for it just works out that way. If you had a population of 87 people who work in an office, like 2 of them are developers, 5 of them are crafters, and 80 of them are knowledge workers of various flavors. So 5 relative to 80, like that's how many people, again, 1 to 16, are willing to engage with something like Excel. And what I'm seeing is that same data gene crowd plus the ability to use coding agents, AI coding agents to build custom software. I mean, this is like going to be the new spreadsheets. Application development is now within range for this crafter crowd. And we're just in the earliest stages of the world waking up to this. Like most crafters haven't yet discovered that they can do this. But we're going to, at steady state, we're going to have about the same number of people building software as we had building spreadsheets.
Michael, how does your team share AI-generated analyses today?
Professionally, we say, hold on. I think I asked Claude this last week, and then sort of disappear into a chat thread like a raccoon in an air duct.
Oh, nice. That's elegant. That's clearly scalable. I mean, actually, that's horrifying.
Why, thank you. It's called innovation.
That's the type of innovation that Ask Why is trying to solve with Prism. Your AI work shouldn't be trapped in one person's Claude innovation.
I have started to realize my private chat history is not a data strategy. It's kind of a junk drawer with confidence.
Well, Prism helps preserve context and memory across users. Like metric definitions and source of truth tables, business rules, prior analyses.
So when I teach it, a qualified lead excludes internal traffic, spam forms, and that one campaign we don't talk about.
The team can build from that shared context instead of starting over entirely.
Beautiful. Less ask Michael what he meant, more the system actually remembers.
And with Prism, analyses are organized, traceable, auditable, and reusable with your other data sets.
I like it. So my best AI work becomes company knowledge, not a screenshot named, is this important maybe, .png?
Exactly.
I guess it's time to stop being a data trash panda when it comes to AI.
Definitely. No pandas in this context. Go to ask-y.ai and sign up for the waitlist. Use code APH to jump to the top of that list.
That's ask-y.ai, code APH, because Check My Claude history is not a collaboration plan. Tim, one of the trickiest parts of measurement is user data gaps.
Right. Someone gives you an email in one session, comes back later from another device, or converts offline, and suddenly the customer journey gets hard to connect.
Exactly. State Enricher is a state power-up that stores selected data from incoming requests and uses it later to enrich future events when information is missing.
So once a user has been identified, Enricher can help recognize them in later events and add previously collected details, all while aligning with consent settings and handling personal data securely.
Yeah, it's especially useful for cross-device journeys, offline conversions, longer buying cycles, and connecting CRM outcomes back to earlier website activity. You can set up Enricher to work with cookies, state store, or both, and it supports uploads of historical data from systems like Shopify, Klaviyo, or your CRM.
So if your tracking has gaps, and whose doesn't, State Enricher can help create more complete, consistent event data.
Yeah, go to state.io to learn more about State Enricher. Improve event match quality, attribution, and visibility into the full customer journey.
That's stape.io. More complete data with consent and privacy in mind.
Besides like the usual FUD, what do you think are some of the barriers to crafters? Because I remember where I was the first time I saw a pivot table, and it was like flew me back in my chair. It was high school,
Yeah.
But what do you think are some of the major barriers that are holding up the crafter crew back?
Well, here's one quick funny story before I answer your question. I worked on the Excel team for a full year before I knew what pivot tables were used for. And
I love that.
I would fake it, be like, yeah, you could throw this into a chart. You could throw it into a pivot. I would just say things like that without ever really even knowing what it was. Just like fake it. Yeah, no, that's what all the cool kids were saying. So I would say that, right? And then one day
I do that with MCP service right now.
Just sprinkle it.
Yeah.
So for you to have seen a pivot table in high school, that's awesome. That is really, really cool. So like, the thing about Excel was that, it was so, I think that most people are even people who end up liking Excel are scared of it at first. Thinking back, I think I was, and even when I worked at Microsoft, like every couple of years, people would move around between teams and office, it was sort of like an open season recruiting. I tried to get people to come to work on Excel, and they wouldn't want to. They would want to go work on Outlook and Word and PowerPoint because they already understood those things, but they could sense that Excel was deeper. Excel is an application development platform. It's a spreadsheet is an application. And so like there's something intimidating about it. I personally, and I say this in the book, I don't pick up new tech readily. I'm not an enthusiastic, like, ooh, shiny, go grab it off the shelf kind of person. Like I kind of have to force myself, and it's really just sort of like not even knowing where to start. Like how to even get it installed. Like even just going and installing something like Claude Code, right? Like at least it used to be harder than it is now. It's a lot easier. But not understanding the nature of the system you're working with, like it just feels like magic. Like so you're putting so much trust in something else that feels opaque to you. I think there's a sort of like a sense of loss of control that is terrifying. And I'm seeing this a little bit with our own team. Like not as much anymore, but in the early going, they're like, well, we derive such confidence from having touched every last single piece of logic, and like artisanally crafted it, right? Like how can we delegate parts of that to another system, So there's a number of things like that. But for me, honestly, it was just kind of getting off the starting line. I just had to sit down and build something.
I have a little bit of a theory, and it bridges those worlds. And it's interesting when you say, PowerPoint and Word and Outlook and Excel, And I don't think I'd really thought about it. If I'm doing something in PowerPoint, I'm making slides. I know I am constrained to this thing of slides. In Word, same thing. With Excel, I feel like the people with the data gene, the crafters, somewhere along the way, they go from it's a table where I'm doing formulas to, oh, wait a minute, I can actually build an interactive app. I can put slicers, or I can put data validation and put drop downs in, and I can kind of build a data product, which I think is one of the reasons Power BI is successful, is because there's the progression through up to Power BI. And I think the same thing happens with any BI platform, is you have that somebody with the data gene saying, I'm crafting an experience. To me, what I think might be happening, and this was purely from actually reading the book that this little light bulb went on, we are all introduced to this new world of AI through the chat interface. And there are plenty of people out there saying, it's more than just the chat. You got to build agents. You got to do all this other stuff. But there are people saying that feels like it's this other thing far away. But really, where it's close is saying, okay, if you just step out of the chat and say, let me use the chat to help me build a data product. Let me use the chat to help me create something. That's where that parallel.
Okay. Yeah.
I started to see, because it just, that light bulb hadn't gone on, that, oh, I can create a deliverable for my audience, for my user. And I've now got a broader set of things at my fingertips, just like going from, I got to hack around in Excel to build an interactive dashboard. I go to Power BI. I've now got a lot of these things. I don't have to come up with the indirect formula in a data validation dropdown to make this filter work. It's just natively there.
I think you just nailed it. I think you nailed it. And I'm not saying that that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm saying that I think you just gave an answer that I didn't have, but I think it's a really good point. So there's a mixture of kind of gaps you have to hop, right? Smooth climbing curves are one thing. Smooth climbing learning curves are one thing, but having to jump from point to point, over a void, those are the places that get us. And there's two big voids here. One of them is that, we sit down and we use the off-the-shelf AI systems. This is a recurring theme in the book, is that the off-the-shelf AI systems are amazing for personal use. They're amazing for individual use. They know everything about all of human history. It's insane. I was using Claude the other day, and it was telling me about the geologic construction of the ground underneath my house here in Seattle. It without even having to search the web. It didn't have to search the web. It knew what the geographic makeup. And so we were calculating the speed of sound in the ground near my house, and it didn't have to search the web.
Oh, yep. You've got the data, Gene. Clearly. Yeah. It was family night.
Okay, look, there's a pile driver driving posts into the lake near our house, and the sound arrives in a 2-syllable thump. You get a thump through the ground, and then you get the clank through the air. It's one thing, but because the speed of sound in the ground is faster, the ground wave gets here. And I was measuring the delta between the time between the two arrive and using that to calculate the distance to how far away the pile driver is. And yes,
that's amazing.
And yes, this is something that the whole family is aware is going on. Dad's calculating this. Is it's 200 meters plus or minus 15. But anyway, so but to think about it, that is publicly available knowledge that's going into this LLM. But if it's about my business, and in the book I showed an example of this, I just have it write me a proposal for this project. It goes and tries to do it, but it knows nothing about us. It just gives the lowest common denominator of a proposal, and it is completely worthless. It is awful. And so there's that gap between business use and personal use, which is again, it's this void, right? It's not you have to jump it all at once.
Well, it's the same void of saying, I know I'm not supposed to put private data into this if I'm using a public, or I'm like, I've been terrified that I'm going to put something in that's going to be a problem. But if I just ask it to do something without it, so how do I put enough stuff in? And that feels like the other connecting the dots, which again, I mean,
yes. So there's that
sycophantic Tim. So maybe I am just an AI agent. I'm like, your book breaks out the different pieces and how to think of them. But that feels like it's like you're using ChatGPT and somebody's like, but don't give it any of your information.
So then this is the second void, is that you have to get comfortable building real, regular software, like stuff that's written in Python or whatever, which is not what data people have traditionally done. Like we've worked in ETL, we've worked in formulas, we've worked in data pipelines and things of that sort. But until you can write your own custom code, you can't build the rest of the system around the LLM to customize it. If you're in charge of that software, then you're also in charge of the storage, and you're in charge of like which version of the API you call. That is, you can call ones that are actually more protected and that don't train on your data. So you can handle that sort of sensitivity, but you have to go from being a non-software developer to being a software developer in order to get this customized experience where you can control the flow of information and you can give context about your business at the right time to the LLM. So you have to sort of jump both of these voids at the same time to get started. And this is why, like in the appendices of the book, the first thing, you just did one of these the other night, I think, Tim, right? The first thing I have people do if they've never used Claude Code or Codex or whatever, like, is just build a website on their computer that's just like a survey, or a quiz that gives a score or whatever. Just get used to the idea of building anything. No AI agent stuff. Just start to get more comfortable with building free-form software. And then we start to layer in the next exercise, like, okay, now we're going to add some LLM to it and see, where it goes from there. So
I'll throw in now, I may regret this, but for shits and giggles, what I wound up doing was a little 15-question multiple choice quiz about my wife's and my relationship and about us that I sent to my 20 plus kids, 20 adult children.
I was like 320 plus. I was like,
no, 320, 3 kids who are all adults. About it's like just family lore stuff, which was like a prompt, and it was fun, standalone. I did wind up having to throw it on Netlify. So it was I had one part of my I already have a Netlify account, I'll throw it there. But it's now, of course, gone to where now my parents have taken it. I mean, my kids do the best, but they've also had a few what? You did. I mean, so you know what? I'll throw a link to it in the show notes, and anybody who wants to get used terribly. Yeah. Why not?
How well do you know Tim Wilson's marriage?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be referred. It's going to refer to mom and dad, and you're going to have to recognize that you're answering.
You're just going to have to be okay with it.
Anyway, it was a great. But just throw in that was like the little unlock was, even though I've done stuff with Cowork, even though I've done stuff with gyms, even though I feel like I've done a lot. There was a piece by the time I got to the end of the book of saying, oh no, there's a software component where what I'm developing with limitations, right? Because you also talk about where you still need developers. This is not now you're turning the people with the data gene, the crafters, into full-blown push stuff into production to hit the masses. The developers now are still needed for their skills.
Yeah. So, we P3, we've hired this year our first 2 full stack developers ever. And it's kind of funny. In fact, I was even in Fortune magazine at one point talking about this because big tech is laying off developers because AI is so good at writing code. In fact, it's better at writing code than anything else. At the same time, though, while it's expanding the capacity of an individual developer to do so much more, that makes their ROI pencil out much differently. And so, in order to achieve what we're achieving today with 2 developers who are all in on using AI to write code, we're getting the results of honestly, what probably would have required a team of 10 developers to do before. So I call this sort of like the migration to the suburbs, for developers. Like there's been a concentration of developer talent in big tech firms because they build huge amounts of technology and they require engineering teams of like 30 developers at a time. And I don't think that they're going to require 30 developers to do the same sorts of things anymore. At the same time, though, the ROI on hiring a developer like in a smaller company or in a department level of an enterprise or whatever is going to be higher than it used to be. So these people are going to have other jobs they can plug into. They're just going to be in different places. The dev team of 2 that we have here, we don't need to go too deep in it, but just to sort of underline it, like we've built things that put us probably about a year ahead of Microsoft in terms of offerings that Microsoft will have. It's like we're able to do things for our clients today with AI around Power BI and things like that Microsoft is absolutely building. But they're not there yet. And so, it gives us an opportunity to fill some gaps there in the meantime. And like, that is just absolutely bananas. A year ago, me would never have guessed that was a possibility.
You would have said the tool, it's not doable. Even with our DAX amazingness, we can't do that. We'll have to wait until Microsoft rolls that out. I mean, or you'd find an alternative way to come at it?
No, I'm thinking it's more like I just hadn't realized how valuable developers were going to be. There's a difference between what a crafter, so I think of myself, I'm 100% a crafter. I'm not a developer. And I talk about there's a form of discipline that's present in a developer. These are mostly personality traits as opposed to like intellectual, like IQ measurements. There's a disciplined patience in a developer, combined with like an aggressive modularization instinct that isn't really present in most crafters. It's not present in me. And so the things that our dev team of 2 have built are things that our crafter team would not have been able to build. They're just levels of complexity, and they even just knowing what to build and figuring out like what the roadmap should look like would have just taken us too long. The developer brain is still really useful. And so one of the things we're working on our team is figuring out how to hybridize developers and crafters to give the best possible results to our clients. Because most developers, and I'm painting with a broad brush here, most developers aren't going to want to be the customer-facing interface that does all that conversation. They want to be writing code, even if they're capable of having those conversations. They love writing code, and meetings take them away from that. Where crafters thrive on interacting with the stakeholders, right? Like that's the world that they came from. They want to be right there up, like almost like pressed up against the audience that they're helping. And so, but there are certain kinds of code, certain kinds of platforms, et cetera, that like you're still going to want developers to do those things, even though we're building solutions at the crafter level. And I do talk a lot in the book about trying to paint pictures of like where those boundaries are. But they're incredibly fluid, like it's like you can't paint a precise picture.
I was going to ask too, to clarify, like when we're talking about crafters, are we, in my brain, and I feel like maybe some of this wording comes from like working at Further and Search Discovery. Like we always talk Tim and Val about like our titles were maybe a little different than somehow like the industry talked about them. But in my head, right, crafters, the way you mentioned it, Rob, to me, I would put in like this engineering group that's more like building the back end of like a BI tool, and like surfacing the data type engineering role. Whereas I came up through more of like the classic like analytics role. We kind of talk about them as like functional analysts, very tied to like the business. I could like build a dashboard, of course, but I wasn't doing like the ETLs in the background. I was doing more of the like business. What are you asking? What is your problem? What's your hypothesis? Let me actually go manipulate the data, build something in R, right? Like a model, do an analysis, and then bring it back to you. In your framing, is a crafter both of those things? Because when you say crafters need to become software developers and like the way of using AI. I'm just curious, are you talking more what I'm saying are engineers, or are you including this like functional analyst group as well?
So I think I should very much clarify that I'm using a very Power BI centric lens for this, because our company's all been all about Power BI. We've long said that we will use another tool if something came along that we like better. But we've been a Microsoft stack company, and it's not because of Microsoft patriotism. Like, I literally formed a company around this thing that I saw.
The Army is going to be coming for this. The comments are going to be.
I am ready. I am ready for that. And when we talk briefly about semantic models, I'm really ready. So
and the Domo people too, but that's only going to be like 3 people. So
I know, yeah. I mean, you just stiff arm them.
Shots fired.
The people that I'm talking about have kind of always sat on the boundary between the business and IT, but they've lived mostly in business. So they reported up through, some non-IT function. They're the shadow IT folks. And so the role you're describing is sort of like the business analyst that does all that interacts with the business and sort of figures out what the needs are. The people who do that, but then also go and like build the spreadsheet, that addresses it, or in our world, then went and discovered Power BI and started doing the ETL and started doing the data modeling and writing the DAX. That's my personal like center of gravity for all of this. So at our company, we talk about it as like the decathlete model. So like most consulting firms, the way they've been constructed over the years is they have specialists. They've got someone who throws the javelin. They've got someone who runs the 100 meters. They've got, right. And so this team of 10 rolls in there on the engagement, and you pay a tremendous amount of communication cost between those 10 people. Most of the elapsed time of the project is actually the communication between the members of the team. It's like 99% of the weight of the project is communication cost and not implementation. And so our whole business model from the beginning was built around this idea that no, like you need to be the decathlete. You're the one that talks to the customer. You're the one that understands their needs. You're the one that builds the ETL. You're the one that builds the data model. You're the one that builds the dashboards. And all that, your bandwidth within your own head is just so much faster than the bandwidth between people. And by the way, also less error prone. And so at least, again, speaking through the lens of my company, the company that we built, this is the persona that's kind of like at ground zero for it. So I think more on the business analyst side than on the quote unquote engineering side. But in the Power BI world, a lot of those business analyst types acquired these skills that had traditionally been the purview of the back office IT types, right? Like we were invading their ETL world, invading their data modeling world, right? Like, tearing down that ivory tower.
I feel like there's the media agency that would say, oh, we manually update this spreadsheet and we put our dates across in the columns and it just makes our skin crawl with the structure of it. And they manually date it and they put some hacky formulas and send some sort of garbage over the wall to the marketer. And then an analyst gets in somebody with a data gene gets in and says, this is error prone. It's not really giving the marketer what they're trying to ask. So I'm going to figure out a way to, maybe it's VBA, maybe it's Google, maybe it's AppScript because we're doing it in Google Sheets. I'm going to figure out a way that we streamline the process and deliver something that is more aggregated, more useful. Oh, and I'm going to put a layer of interactivity on it, and I'm not going to be able to stop. And then suddenly I'm the person who the digital marketers come to and they say, can you make one of those spreadsheets? And like, that's where we've crossed over and we're like, wait a minute, are we developers? Like, no, you're still not a developer. But I also feel like it's where analytics engineers arose. That is a whole field that came out of analysts who said, damn it, I can't keep waiting for the engineering team every time I want to change the ETL. I'm just going to build myself a little sandbox. And all of a sudden that became an entire position or a total role. of where the analyst just kind of gets better. And the point I think that like in the light bulb that went on for me was like, oh, wow, I would never consider building a front end. I would never consider something that limits the rules that is actually software. But guess what? Those same people with a little bit more knowledge and a little bit of practice can actually extend it with a boundary of where does it cross over to a developer, but they have this other thing that we've never even thought of as being in our arsenal.
It seems like one of the first steps to someone kind of seeing for these crafters to have their eyes open is to get out of chat, to start building. And I think some of those examples you guys talked about was great, but something you touched upon earlier, Robin, obviously got into it deeply in the book, is thinking about how do you give it the context about your business that is required in order for it to actually be the partner for you that it needs versus just like the generic off the shelf. Like, how would an individual contributor think about going about that in a way that's productive for them in role? Like, do you have any advice for taking that leap, which feels like another step?
Yeah, I mean, what's really amazing is just how much smarter even the LLMs seem to get when you give them something to go on. So the first example that I talk about in the book is the concept of what I call a handbook. So if you had a new hire, and one of the metaphors I use is an LLM is basically something that has especially the frontier new LLMs. They basically have PhDs in every human subject, everything that you could get a PhD in. The LLM has that level of knowledge and even ability to reason to a certain extent in all of those subjects, but it shows up every day knowing nothing about your business. And if you thought of it as a person for a moment that showed up with all of that skill, but knowing nothing about your business, they would be relatively useless to you. Like you don't care about the history of the Roman Empire most of the time in your business, right? You don't care about the ground speed of sound underneath Mott Lake, Seattle, most of the time in your business, right? But you do have policies and a brand framework and workflows and things like that. And so like if you were going to hand a new hire some sort of handbook, an instruction manual for their job, it would be written in English, like if you're in the United States anyway, right? Like it'd be written in natural human language. That same sort of document can be handed to an LLM every time it wakes up. And if you again, now you're writing custom code, right? So you've had to take control, and you're not using the ChatGPT built-in interface or the off-the-shelf interface anymore. Like you're sort of like taking control of it. You're building your own software, but it's not that hard. It really isn't. And your software, the first thing it does when your software wakes up, when someone asks it a question or something like that, like let's say you're building your own chatbot, the first time the chatbot wakes up, every time, it goes and grabs that handbook and feeds the handbook to the LLM saying, here's what you're doing for us today. Here's your personality. Here's the rules that you follow. And that lands in the LLM's brain before any question from the user does. And suddenly it goes from being this off-the-shelf, useless thing that can't help you with your business because it doesn't know your business, to being a world beater. And if you just think about that for a moment, just pushing some instructions and some context, just like some information about your business. Who are we? What do we do? Like what's your corner of the world here? And each of these agents you build like this, they become specialists in that one role, right? You don't, I talk about like in the book, you're never going to build a super being that knows everything about your business, because everything about your business can't fit, believe it or not, it can't fit into the LLM's memory. It will overload it. So you have to give it narrow lanes. And, so like if you have like, you can imagine agents with 5 different roles. Like I've got one that helps me write marketing copy. I created an editor to help me with my book. And they have different instructions, right? One of them is instructed how to write like our company, and the other one is instructed not to write anything for me. The other one's instructed to help hold me to my standard of writing. And when it makes suggestions on fixes, don't make suggestions that make it sound like boring business voice. Remember that I'm still trying to sound like me when you're criticizing my work. So like, for example, I don't want my editor to ever say to me, hey, Rob, you start too many sentences with the word and or but. That's just how I write. So shut up about that. We're not going to do it that way, So this idea of handbooks is really like the first place to start. But then over time, you start to give these agents, and again, you're just giving the LLM sort of a menu. You give it the ability to pull information that it wants. Because you can't know in advance what information it needs. So you give the LLM some ability to go and pull information it needs. And by the way, we've all seen this in action already. Every time you go to an off-the-shelf LLM product and you ask it a question, when it switches off and does a web search, it's doing exactly that. It's recognizing that it needs more information from elsewhere and triggering something that's called a tool. And the tool is it's something, it literally just sends a chat request to the tool, the LLM does, and then the tool goes and performs the web search and returns the results back to the LLM. And you can do that with your own internal databases. You can do that with your own internal knowledge bases, which is crazy.
So for a very specific example, it immediately, when I think of like AI and use of analytics, you hear about every tool putting in AI chatbot or AI agent on top of their BI tool, right? And it's supposed to like be so great. And then
everyone's got to have one.
Had experience with it. Yeah. And as most people that actually go in and use them, they don't know anything about your business, and I have not found a helpful one so far. And so then, of course, that gets us into the idea of like, oh, it needs a semantic layer. It needs context. So I'm kind of like wrapping us into two possible paths here, and you can choose whichever one, but I'd love to talk about them both. One being the whole semantic layer conversation, but two, in what you were just talking about, what advice would you give an analytics practitioner, a crafter of your company has this BI tool and it has this AI agent? Like, are you saying you can control that AI agent with like these handbooks and things, which it sounds like maybe leans into semantic layer? Or are you saying, don't use the off the shelf thing, go make your own custom one? Or is this scenario not applicable at all? Option C.
I think they're both kind of the same conversation, honestly. Like the key thing to recognize about any AI solution, and this is the thing that kind of blew my mind, is that the LLM is sort of like almost like it's just something you pick off the shelf, and it's almost like an element on the periodic table. It is exactly the same for you as it is for me, as it is for as it is for Satya Nadella at Microsoft. It's the exact same LLM, and it's really just like a component. And making these things do anything useful for us is all about just regular software, not AI. Just regular software. And the regular software's job is to handle like the user experience, just like it always does, as well as the flow of information to and from the LLM, like giving the LLM access to what it needs to know. So let's keep in mind for a moment that most AI agents, if we fast forward like 2 years and we see what the future looks like, most AI agents that are deployed at companies aren't going to be about analytics. Like a chat bot that handles the first level of interaction with customer service, for instance. It doesn't need to be performing strategic queries against your data warehouse, right? Like it really just needs to have a flow chart in it, and also some instructions on how to talk to people and what not to say and all that kind of stuff. And that sort of falls into the handbook category. So there's a lot of tactical AI agents that aren't going to have anything to do with what we think of as analytics. I mean, I just want to level set that. What's kind of neat, though, is that even those tactical things that have nothing to do with analytics, they still, because they operate on information that needs to be very carefully controlled and fed at the right time, the types of discipline that we've developed as analytics people, as data people, are the right mindset for making those things work properly, and now that you've given us, the world has given us crafter types, the ability to write real software very quickly with the use of an agentic, like something like Claude code. We've got everything at our fingertips that we're going to be really good at building those sorts of solutions, even though they're not related to traditional analytics at all. And so I want to make sure that I'm not pigeonholing us data crowd into just the traditional data crowd type AI stuff. So and the handbook stuff is not part of what you're hearing when people talk about semantic models or semantic layers. Handbooks are not really part of that. Semantic layers are a decoder ring for your structured data. And that's now we're back in the analytics and data crowd. We're back in our home neighborhood now. Yes, and so I think this isn't even really controversial, honestly, because we were talking about the Tableau crowd coming for me. Okay, so it doesn't matter what platform you're associated with. Like if you're a Tableau professional, you're a Snowflake professional, you're a Power BI professional. I think it's really just like a foregone conclusion that you are going to be working with semantic models and semantic layers. And I can give you the technical reason why, but I can also just give you the market reason why. So let's take Tableau as an example, and I love this. This just tickles me to death. So the best thing about Power BI, from a technical standpoint, the best thing about Power BI was not the reason why it got adopted. The reason Power BI won the BI wars and has the largest market share is because it was cheapest and it was integrated with the rest of Microsoft. That's it. No one was evaluating like, ooh, it's so cool that you have a semantic model and this star schema stuff and all. Like it makes a difference in practice, but that's not why it won. And Tableau long neglected the idea of semantic models. They were all about each time you need a new dashboard, you go write a bunch of new SQL queries to make a big, flat, wide rectangle of data that you hide behind the dashboard. That's the philosophy over and over and over again. And the thing is, it worked, right? I mean, like they IPO'd, they sold to Salesforce. I mean, those people made gobs and gobs and gobs of money. So it's like, I'd start arguing with them about like, well, you all don't have a semantic layer. And they go, well, I have more money than you. I'm like, God, you're right. They eventually invented a semantic layer that sort of was an attempt to sort of add what Power BI had been doing from the beginning, but then they neglected it. A friend of mine at Tableau was in charge of that for a long time, and eventually he just retired in frustration. He just gave up. Okay. I'm not even making this up. Okay. Well, after so many of these companies have neglected semantic layers forever, they all banded together to form this OSI thing, which I think has been talked about on the show before, Open Semantic Interchange. And on the Tableau website less than a year ago, there was an article that says, the agentic future demands an open semantic layer. Okay? So everyone now, every data company that wasn't in on semantic layers is now in on semantic layers. Every single one of them has something. They either are sticking with the one they already had, like in Microsoft's case, or they're banding together in this open standard and rapidly integrating into that product and trying to get their customers to adopt it. Now, why would they be doing that?
As a company builds a semantic layer, I think, and this was when we had Cindy Howson on to talk about it, there was something she said that I really like. So she was kind of in the OSI heavy camp. Our last episode, we had Jacob Mattson. We talked about maybe we don't need one at all. So we've kind of covered, I think my one question is like, how does the semantic layer not get held up as the monolithic boogeyman and the monster dev project of saying, Yes. We will do glorious things with AI as soon as we build the semantic layer, because we did that with data dictionaries. We've done that. I mean, at least in the days of PowerPlay cubes and SSS, like they were contained. But like that's where I get nervous about semantic layers, is it becomes an excuse and people like, we have to build the entirety of the story of our data.
You could take your concern there that you just shared, and you could plug and play, replace that with data warehouse like 7 or 8 years ago. And that would be something that was a talk and a spiel that I would give everywhere. Like the data warehouse. Well, we got to go build the data warehouse first. And the other thing is data warehouse is never done. And by the way, the other thing about data warehouses is that you would find that you've been trying to anticipate all of these future needs and you anticipated them poorly. So you built plumbing to nowhere, places that faucets were never going to be needed. But then the first time you need a faucet, you go and you look and there's no pipe, the place you needed the faucet. So you over-engineered and under-engineered at the same time. And yeah, I agree. Like those sorts of monolithic projects that kind of become their own thing. They become like a goal in and of themselves. Those are danger. You do not want that, right? So one of the things we've been, one of our philosophies at our company, we call it faucets first. We start with the faucet and we build backwards from there. Okay. So yes, we do need responsible data plumbing, but if you're building plumbing forward, you're going to lose. Now, if you're a consulting company and you're building plumbing forward, you're going to win because you're going to build a lot of hours. And then when things don't work, you're going to build a lot more hours to fix it. Right. But if you go faucets first and you go faucets backwards, you can get everything that you need. So I think semantic models, and the way we approach Power BI is to sit down and go faucets first. Like we don't go build a big data model before we build our first dashboard. Like the whole point is to get to a first dashboard as quickly as possible so that the customer can go, okay, that's not right in these 3 or 4 different ways. And then we go modify the data model to fit it, right? The same thing here. If your goal is to build, and okay, so let's bridge a really important gap here. The reason why a semantic model is suddenly so important today, like it was important to BI, but no one cared other than Power BI really. But everyone now cares, is because you don't have the what I call the semantic shock absorber of the people that you lock in a room and make them write the queries for each. So, each new dashboard that's created is really representing new questions that have emerged, right? The business has new questions, so you can build a new dashboard. This has been inefficient, really, even in the Power BI world. This is really not optimal, okay? But it's even less optimal in the Tableau world, where it requires like a week's worth of SQL work before you get the first dot on the chart, right? If an AI agent forms a new question or a user comes to an AI chatbot with a new question, there's no time for someone to go write a week's worth of SQL. And you also don't want to trust the AI to go write that SQL because it will write it slightly differently each time and it won't know which column means what in the source data. Like this is why the decoder ring analogy, I think, is so apt. Semantic layer is just a very nerdy way to say decoder ring. Like we wrote down what things mean. We wrote down how to translate our company's structured data into meaning that matters to the business. Like what is gross profit defined as, right? There's a lot of nuance to that that's different for every single business. And so if you look at it through an AI lens and you go, okay, what does this AI agent need to do? And then you build the semantic model that is required to power that, you're in a much more focused means of engagement than if you're trying to like, let's go model the whole business, just the whole thing. And let's just party on this thing forever and never test it and never, right? No, that's not the way. Right.
And I was going to say too, like, I love what you're saying. And I just feel like people are finally waking up to this idea and that like surfacing the data alone was not the valuable part. And so like why people could get the budget approved for data warehouse or like projects or the huge semantic layer projects, I feel like it's because, and Tim, you've talked about this a million times, right? Like the promise of the value of like having the thing, having the data. And in current conversations with clients, and I've seen it more like across the industry in articles, there's this whole like, well, what's the actual return on investment for AI? And I just feel like AI has become this thing that really highlights to people that just because your data is there or you have all this data, right? Like even though AI can access it and use all of it that you've spent so much time and effort to create and surface, the output of AI is not inherently valuable to you. Like it is finally like the mirror to that flawed thinking. And so it's interesting when you were saying like faucet first design, I do feel like everyone is now afraid to just be like, oh yeah, do another AI POC. They're like, no, I need to know that my faucet in my business is going to work. Not that you can go make plumbing in another room. Like, I don't care about that plumbing in another room. So I really like that finally clicked for me in the conversation we've been having, but I'm curious your thoughts on like AI being scrutinized for value and this idea of like the data itself is not the value to the business.
AI should be scrutinized for value. There's a lot of pressure to just go do AI, right? Because everyone can sense the uncertainty of inaction, right? If we're not doing anything about AI, we are falling behind, right? As a business. And so, but like what happens is the people who don't know what to do about AI at all, they don't know how to apply it, but they're important. They're like board members or whatever. They lean on executives and say, hey, you need to be doing AI, right? And the executive doesn't know. So they turn to someone else and say, you need to be doing AI. And then you end up in these weird, crazy things. We've all heard these stories and they're real about people measuring teams' usage of AI tools. And by the way, they're always the off-the-shelf tools. So they're the wrong things for most business uses, right? And making sure that people are using them, because if they're not using them, then they can't go back up the chain and say, hey, we are doing something about AI, right? We're in a really, really strange place where no one knows what to do with it, but the amount of pressure to do it is, I don't think we've ever been in a situation like this.
Yeah.
Like BI wasn't like this. Right? Like
right.
No one was ever under pressure to do BI, like unfortunately, right? They like the boards never came to their, C-suites and said, you should be doing BI. Well,
I feel like personalization was a little bit like that, Val. Like we heard that from a lot of clients, right? Like our goal is to do personalization. You're like, but to what end? Yeah. Like
digital transformation. Yeah. So I just think that the semantic model case with an AI chat interface over the top of it is one of the easiest wins for AI adoption that's actually going to add ROI. So for people who have Power BI investments, if they've got good semantic models, we're putting in AI chat interfaces, and honestly, they're so much better than dashboards. They're so much friendlier. They're so much more user-friendly. People actually get value out of them. And even the people who built the semantic models, who know the ins and outs, even I use the chat interface to go and do all kinds of things for me, to go research things for me that I wouldn't do otherwise. It's not even like about saving me time. I form better questions and kick my buddy off to go research it for me. And again, it leans on the semantic model. It doesn't hallucinate. It gets real answers from real systems, and comes back and I can send my assistant back and to do more if I want. Under all this pressure, and again, as data and analytics professionals, it is one of the easiest and most trustworthy and best places to start dipping our toes into AI is to start enabling these sorts of AI chat interfaces that actually work, not the ones that come off the shelf from the vendor. But if you build it, you build something yourself. Like we've got this framework that we've built. Again, we have these two developers that have been doing amazing things for us. Like our clients freaking love this stuff and we love it. So I think it's one of those, it's not the only thing. I do not want to say this is like the future of AI, but it is a great place to dip the toe into it. that does add value, and it's right in our backyard. So I wanted to make sure I got that little, career
it's a great
advice.
place to land the plane for kickoff for show 2.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's I have so many more questions, so many more thoughts, but we also are up against the clock. So this has been a fantastic discussion. And I think it's even in this discussion from reading the book, lots of light bulbs have gone on for me. So this has been enormously useful to me, at least. And it's all about me. But last thing we like to do on the show is go around the group and everyone share a last call, something or maybe a couple somethings that might be of interest or amusing or entertaining or useful to our audience. And Rob, you're our guest. So do you have a last call or two?
I do. I have one that's relevant and then one that's kind of just funny off topic. So the one, and I'll obviously provide you the link, but an old friend of mine at Microsoft named Uli Homan wrote something on LinkedIn recently where he talks about this new role he's calling the product engineer. We've had software engineers, software developers, all that kind of stuff. We've also had product managers who were like the designers of it and all that kind of stuff. And he makes a very, I think, eloquent case for, I think, where we're all going to land with this product engineer role. And so I think it's a worthwhile read, and it's not very long. And I think it lands the concept pretty cleanly.
Then what's the relevant one? No.
Well, so you said it could be any link to anything that we've ever liked, right? That's true, right? So this is an article from 2005 on the McSweeney's website. It's titled "A Realistic Assessment of How Many 12-Year-Olds I Could Beat Up Before They Overtook Me." And it is such an analytical, dispassionate analysis that uses game theory and and assumes optimal behavior on the part of the 12-year-olds. It's like, no, the 12-year-olds aren't going to get up in a nice line and let me take them one at a time. They're going to form a circle, right? And they're going to know that groin kicks are their primary weapon against me. And here's how big an average 12-year-old is, and just really just breaks it down and eventually comes up with a very reasoned argument for why this certain number is probably the number that would take him.
I love it.
It's so funny.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
That's really funny.
Julie, what's your last call?
Mine, actually, I feel like this ties back to, Rob, what you were talking about in your use with AI agents. A colleague recently shared an article called "AI May Be Making Us Think and Write More Alike." And it sparked my interest right away because I feel like multiple times on the show, I've said but what about groupthink and the cyclical, self-fulfilling prophecy? I'm like, if AI is then using our AI outputs to then continue modeling, I'm like, it's all just gonna converge somewhere. So anyways, this was very fulfilling for me to see that there's now been research that yes, it's actually happening. They've pretty much said that they're seeing all of this really come to a point where everyone's losing their unique voice in writing. And because of that too, what everyone is putting out is becoming more similar. So it is this idea of the group think happening. And it's funny because they say the AI solution, Rob, similar to what you did, is they were saying you need to make sure you have a very clear framework to ask your AI model to enforce strict stylistic constraints and make sure that you can extract your distinctive voice. So I thought that was funny. It's AI is the answer, even though AI is the problem. And it was this whole, echo chamber. So it's an interesting read.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
not everyone's trying to sound the same, but a lot of people are.
I feel like you can read something now and you're like, oh, yeah. Well, that sounds like AI. It's pretty quick.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to resist.
Mm-hmm.
Val, what's your last call?
So there's a AI tie-in for this one, but it is very self-serving because it comes from some of my coworkers at Finn. But my thing is, I 30% of my last calls come from UX Collective, this this publishing group on Medium, and this could have very well been on there. So it's a Substack article, all that caveat build up, and it's called Designing the Front Door. And what I thought was really interesting is it's like from this engineer and this designer at Finn thinking about how you create the front door to some of the agents that are not the helper agents, the chatbot, the little thing you see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, right? But they're calling it like the Spotlight Messenger. And what I think is really interesting about the article beyond the solution that they landed on is how they use data and experimentation and lots of research to figure out what is the optimal way to bring some of that to bear in a way that doesn't harm other interactions, whatever. And it just feels like some of the research that I did when I was at Further with the consent management banners, 4 years ago, and thinking about like, how do you surface this when there is no established pattern? And so it's an interesting look at it with some fun examples, and it's a quick read. So it's a good one. Nice. So how about you, Tim?
So I'm going to kick it old school with a ebook. It's on a GitHub.io site called Models Demystified, a practical guide from linear regression to deep learning. So if you want to step away from AI and just kind of understand generalized linear models a little bit deeper, or causal modeling, I have not read the whole thing. I've kind of sampled it. It's got kind of a lot of the models are kind of R is available and Python. So you can kind of play with either one. But I feel like that maybe when I get overwhelmed by Claude and going back and forth, it's a good little thing to dip in to say, maybe I should just give some deeper statistical knowledge, and a good old fashioned ebook looks like a good way to do it.
So that's how Tim touches grass. That's what you're saying? Yeah.
That's what I'm not measuring the speed of sound waves through different materials. So,
but you can. You absolutely can.
Yeah. That's the important bit. I love
it. And can I just throw one last little plug in here, and you could edit it out if it doesn't fit. And I just want to encourage people to go to fairgamebook.ai and pre-order the book. I mean, I genuinely wrote this to help people. Writing books doesn't make enough money to ever be worth the personal sacrifice. And so I was really gratified by y'all reading it in advance. And it's for our crowd. It's for leaders. And I think it will actually help you not be so afraid. Like if you're having some angst about AI, I felt like sitting down writing that book, my job was to help you feel better about it. Like actually turn it into excitement. So I genuinely hope that it helps people.
Well, and I will say, so you took it from me because I was definitely going to plug the book again. So I will further endorse that because I did find it to be extremely useful. We had a proof of it, so it was like a super early version. So I mean, it was a proof, so we could not copy anything from it. We could not highlight anything in it. So like the notes had to be like old school retyping. Brilliant things. And
you know what, Tim, you sit down with Claude Code and it's wide open. You can do whatever. There's no protection anymore.
Well, okay. I'm not going to say maybe there was a way that I could throw the whole thing at AI and have it read it. But
even when I'm making those Claudes, tell me, hey, Rob, this isn't going to actually protect you, Yeah,
that's a fair point. All right. Well, Rob, thank you so much for coming on. On the one hand, you're like promoting a book, but the book is in itself really useful. And this discussion, I think, was extremely useful. So thank you for taking the time to come on. And
likewise.
do that.
And really, I think y'all, I mean, again, I hadn't met y'all before now. I really think I love your format. I love your approach. I think you're doing great work here. So I really appreciate the invitation.
Well, awesome. So what you could do, and any of our listeners could do, or you could have an agent do, is go leave us a review and a rating. Look at that. Look at that segue.
Oh, I'm on it.
Make Michael proud.
How many reviews do you want? I got Claude.
That's right. You said. So we
just one.
Yeah. So if you listen on a platform that allows leaving reviews, listeners, we would love to get reviews and ratings. That helps us out. If you'd like a sticker for the show, you can go to analyticshour.io and fill in the little form there. We'll send you stickers. We also love to hear from our listeners, so you can reach out to us on LinkedIn, on the Measure Slack. You can just email us at contact@analyticshour.io. But regardless of how many faucets you've turned on, if the faucet's first, if the plumbing's first, if you're deep into Claude code already, or if you're now just inspired to get into Claude code, no matter what you do, for myself, for Julie, for Val, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at @AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measure Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
Those smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Do the analytics say go for it no matter who's going for it? So if you and I were on the field, the analytics say go for it. It's the stupidest, laziest, lamest thing I've ever heard for reasoning in competition.
It's all semantics.
Yeah, it is indeed. Ciao. And I saw what you wrote in the doc in response, and I'm like, oh yeah, so that's okay. I'm not gonna ruin it. Like, well,
I mean, I will try. I mean, it's not like we can't touch on it at all. I just think there's so much other gold for us to hit on. I'll, as the moderator, I will say, you know what? I'll allow it, but you're going to be on a short leash.
A shot clock. Okay. All right. I got it. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, we're gonna barely scratch the surface of everything I think we would want to talk about, and that's just a sign of a good show. So, unless Michael Helbling is running the show, in which case it's because he has lost control and did a terrible job. And Tony, feel free to put that in the outtake.
We always bully him into one more question, you know?
Rock flag and data genes to crafters.